The November wind sliced through the streets of Aurora like a blade honed on ice, slipping through the gaps in Clara Bennett's wool coat and settling cold against her bones. She stood on the sidewalk outside the glass and steel tower of Voss Innovations, her fingers curled so tightly around the crisp sheet of her resignation letter that the edge creased and dampened under her palm. For 6 years, she had walked through those revolving doors every weekday at 8:15 sharp, her head held just so, her mind already running through the day's spreadsheets and reconciliations. For 6 years, she had carried a secret heavy enough to bow her shoulders, a quiet fire burning low in her chest that she had never dared let flare. Today, that fire was going to burn through everything. She drew in a breath that stung her lungs, sharp with the smell of burnt coffee from the corner bodega and the damp, earthy tang of fallen maple leaves crushed underfoot, and pushed open the heavy oak door to the executive wing. The receptionist looked up, smiled the usual polite, empty smile, and then faltered when she saw Clara's face. Clara didn't stop. She walked straight down the carpeted hallway to the corner office at the end, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the view of the river, the one that belonged to Harold Voss. She knocked once, sharp and steady, and pushed the door open without waiting for an answer. "Mr. Voss, I'd like to speak with you." Harold was slouched in his custom leather executive chair, scrolling through something on his phone, the glow of the screen reflecting off his slicked-back dark hair. He was 43 years old, with a paunch starting to push at the buttons of his tailored dress shirt, and a Patek Philippe Calatrava glinting on his left wrist under the harsh fluorescent office lights. He didn't look up, just made a low, non-committal hum in the back of his throat, like she was a fly buzzing near his desk. Clara stepped forward and set her resignation letter flat on the polished mahogany surface, the paper making a soft, final sound against the wood. "This is my formal resignation. Per my employment contract, I'm providing 30 days written notice." That got his attention. His thumb stilled on the screen. He lifted his head, dark eyes sharp and assessing, and flicked his gaze from the letter to her face, a slow, mocking smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. There was something predatory in that smile, something that had always made Clara's skin crawl, even when she'd told herself it was just the way powerful men carried themselves. Well, well, Clara Bennett. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. 6 years, and just like that, you're walking away. "The terms are clearly outlined in my contract," she said, keeping her voice flat and even as her heart thudded hard against her ribs, fast and sharp like a hammer. 30 days notice, and the company is obligated to process my separation and release all final pay and benefits." "Obligated?" Harold snorted. He picked up the letter between 2 fingers, held it like it was something dirty, and flicked it off to the side of his desk. It slid across the smooth wood and landed on the carpet. "You think this company is some kind of bus stop? You hop on when it's convenient, hop off when you feel like it? We invested in you. 6 years of training, 6 years of salary, 6 years of carrying you." Clara's jaw tightened until her molars ached. She kept her hands clasped loosely in front of her so he wouldn't see her fists curl. "Mr. Voss, you know what my performance record looks like. I've closed every quarter on time. I've streamlined 3 separate accounting processes. I've saved the company." "Saved the company?" He laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "You're a finance manager, Clara. You crunch numbers. You file tax forms. Any fresh grad with a CPA could do your job. Don't act like you're irreplaceable." The office door swung open then, hard enough to bang against the wall. Priscilla Drake swept in, her stiletto heels clicking sharp and fast against the marble floor, her red lipstick pulled into a permanent sneer. She was 46, with caked-on foundation that didn't quite match her neck, and perfume so strong it hit Clara from 10 feet away, something heavy and floral, expensive and cloying. Her eyes landed on the resignation letter peeking out from under the desk, and they narrowed to cold, sharp slits. "Mr. Voss, what's all the commotion?" Her voice was high and reedy, like nails scraping down a window pane. "Clara's quitting," Harold said, leaning back and lighting a cigar. The smoke curled up toward the ceiling, thick and sweet and choking, and Clara fought the urge to cough. throwing away 6 years of opportunity, just like that. Priscilla's lips curled into a smug, bitter smile. She sauntered over to lean against Harold's desk, her arms folded over her chest, and looked Clara up and down like she was examining a piece of damaged merchandise. Quitting? Well, color me surprised. Must have landed a fancy new job somewhere, huh? Always knew you thought you were too good for this place. Our little startup was never gonna hold someone as ambitious as you. It's personal reasons, Clara said flatly. She had no interest in explaining herself to this woman. No interest in explaining anything to anyone in this building. Personal reasons. Priscilla sked, shaking her head. She turned to Harold, her tone sharpening. Mr. Voss, you know company policy on asset recovery. When an employee separates, we audit all assigned company property. That laptop Clara's been toting around for 6 years? We paid almost $2,000 for that top-of-the-line machine. 6 years of heavy use? There's depreciation, damage, wear and tear. She needs to compensate the company for that. Clara blinked. For half a second, she thought she'd misheard. The what? The laptop. Priscilla said it like she was explaining basic math to a child, slow and condescending. Company property. You've pounded on that keyboard so hard half the keycaps are worn smooth. There's a 3-inch scratch across the screen from that time you dropped your pen on it. That's damage. You owe the company for the loss of value. That is not a thing, Clara said, anger coiling hot and tight in her chest. There is no labor law, no state regulation, no company policy that requires an employee to pay for normal wear and tear on a work laptop. Labor law. Harold exhaled a cloud of smoke, his eyes cold. Clara, don't stand there and recite textbook rules at me. You think I don't know you've been using that company laptop for personal work? Side gigs, private spreadsheets, all kinds of things you shouldn't be doing on company time. I should be suing you for theft of resources, not asking for $1,200. I have never used company equipment for personal work, she said, and it was true. The files on that laptop weren't personal. They were evidence. Thousands of pages of it, encrypted in a hidden partition, 6 years of lies and fraud and stolen tax dollars, all carefully cataloged and dated. Cold sweat prickled down her spine. If they had IT dig into the drive, if they found the hidden folder. Never. Priscilla laughed, sharp and shrill. Please. Spare us the innocent act. Mr. Voss, I say we have IT pull a full forensic image of that drive. For all we know, she's been leaking client data, stealing trade secrets. We could press criminal charges. The room went quiet for a beat. Clara's heart was hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. She thought about the hidden drive, about the years of records, about what would happen if Harold got his hands on them. He would destroy them. He would bury everything. And he would ruin her, too. Then she thought of her mom. Of her cold, thin hand in Clara's, of her voice, weak but steady. You protect yourself first, baby. You be smart. Enough. Harold waved a hand like he was swatting a gnat. He fixed Clara with a hard, calculating look. Clara, you want to walk out of here clean? You pay the depreciation fee. $1,200. Cash or check right now. That's the deal. $1,200? She stared at him, stunned despite herself. That laptop is 6 years old. It's slow, the battery dies in an hour, and the screen is yellowing. Its current market value is maybe $150. Market value isn't replacement value, Priscilla purred, looking like the cat that ate the canary. You damaged company assets. You pay to make the company whole. Those are the rules now. They weren't in the employee handbook when I signed. They are now. Harold stubbed his cigar out in the cut crystal ashtray on his desk, the embers hissing as they died. Clara, you're a smart woman. You know how this works. You write the check, you walk out with a clean record, a good reference, everything. Or I have HR terminate you for gross misconduct, misuse of company property, violation of data security policy. No severance, a black mark on your employment record, and good luck getting another finance job in this city. Everyone knows everyone in this industry. Clara held his gaze. She looked at the man who'd hired her straight out of college, who'd shaken her hand and told her she was going to be a star, who'd spent 6 years using her skills to line his own pockets while her mom wasted away in a hospital bed. She looked at his smug face, his expensive watch, his cigar smoke curling in the air, and she felt a cold, quiet anger settle in her chest. Not the hot, sharp anger of a moment ago. Something deeper. Something colder. Something that had been building for 6 years. Through the half-open door, she could hear murmurs from the open office floor. Heads peeked around cubicle walls, eyes wide with curiosity and glee. She recognized some of the voices. Did you hear? Bennett's quitting. Serves her right. Always walking around like she was better than the rest of us. Voss isn't gonna let her just walk. You watch. He'll make her regret it. Priscilla strode to the door and wrenched it all the way open, holding it there like she was putting on a show for the whole floor. What are you all gawking at? Get back to work. Clara here's moving on to bigger and better things. Our little company was just a stepping stone for her. Her voice carried across the entire office, loud and clear. Every eye in the building was on her now. Clara could feel them, curious, smug, cruel. A few people she'd once considered friends, people she'd had lunch with, people she'd covered for when they needed to leave early, stared down at their keyboards, suddenly very interested in their spreadsheets. No one looked at her. No one said a word. Well, Clara, Harold said, leaning back in his chair, a smirk on his face. What's it gonna be? You gonna be reasonable, or are you gonna make this hard on yourself? She closed her eyes. For a split second, she was back in the hospital room, the smell of antiseptic thick in the air, her mom's hand cold in hers. You have to have boundaries, baby, her mom had whispered, her voice rough from the oxygen tube. But you don't have to fight every battle out in the open. You pick your moment. And when you pick it, you don't hold back. Clara opened her eyes. Her face was calm, completely blank. She reached into her leather tote bag, pulled out her checkbook, and set it on the desk. She picked up a pen, uncapped it, and wrote out the amount, $1,200, in neat, precise handwriting. She tore the check free and set it down on the desk in front of him. Is that sufficient? Her voice was so steady, so cold, it barely sounded like her own. Harold picked up the check and held it up to the light, like he was checking for counterfeit. He nodded, satisfied, and tucked it into his shirt pocket. That's more like it. Was that so hard? Could have saved us both 10 minutes of nonsense. Such a smart girl, Priscilla simpered, pushing off the desk. Oh, and Clara? Your handoff documentation needs to be finalized and signed off within 3 business days. Any delay, and we'll deduct the cost of lost productivity from your final paycheck. Standard policy. Clara didn't answer. She didn't look at either of them. She turned on her heel and walked toward the door. Wait. Harold's voice stopped her just before she stepped into the hallway. Leave your ID badge and your access key card. Your access is revoked effective immediately. She unclipped the lanyard from around her neck. She looked down at the photo on the ID for half a second. It was 6 years old, taken her first week on the job. She'd been 23, bright-eyed, smiling like she had the whole world in front of her. There was light in her eyes then. She set the badge and the key card on the front desk on her way out. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. She didn't look back. The November wind hit her full in the face the second she stepped through the revolving doors, sharp and cold, and she drew in a deep, shuddering breath. For the first time in 6 years, she didn't have to pretend. She didn't have to bite her tongue. She didn't have to look away. She was free. She pulled her phone out of her coat pocket and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she'd saved 3 years ago, the one she'd never thought she'd actually dial, State Department of Revenue, Tax Fraud Hotline. Her finger hovered over the call button for 3 long seconds. She thought about the consequences. About the trial, the testimony, the lawyers, the way Harold would try to ruin her. She thought about the 6 years of quiet, about the secret she'd carried, about her mom's voice. Then she pressed call. The line rang twice. A woman's voice answered, professional and calm. State Tax Fraud Hotline. How may I direct your call? Hello. Clara's voice was steady. She looked up at the glass tower of Voss Innovations, 12 stories of steel and glass and lies, and she spoke clearly. I'm calling to report systematic tax fraud at Voss Innovations. The total estimated amount of evaded taxes is approximately $9.5 million over a 6-year period. I have full documentation. She hung up the phone and stood there on the sidewalk for a long minute, watching the cars go by, watching people hurry into the building for their 9-to-5 jobs, just like she had done for 6 years. 6 years. It felt like a lifetime. She turned and walked toward the subway station. She had somewhere to be. Her phone buzzed in her pocket 40 minutes later, just as she was stepping off the train. An unknown number, local area code. Ms. Bennett? This is Inspector Liam Nash with the State Department of Revenue, Criminal Investigations Division. We received your report regarding Voss Innovations. This is a very high-value allegation, and we'd like to meet with you in person immediately to review the evidence and take a formal statement. Are you available this afternoon? I'm available, she said, adjusting the strap of her tote bag on her shoulder. Send me the address. I'll be there within the hour. She hung up and tilted her face up to the gray, overcast sky. The air smelled like rain. A storm was coming. And for the first time in 6 years, Clara Bennett wasn't running for cover. She was the storm. The State Revenue Building sat on the south side of the city, a blocky, brutalist concrete structure with narrow, tinted windows that looked like they were designed to intimidate. Clara checked in at the front desk, her tote bag heavy with the first batch of evidence, and followed a uniformed officer down a linoleum hallway to a small, windowless conference room. A digital voice recorder sat in the middle of the table, next to a leather-bound notebook and 2 chipped ceramic mugs. Inspector Nash was waiting for her. He was in his mid-40s, with thinning brown hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a faint scar across his left eyebrow. He stood when she walked in and offered her a hand, his grip firm and professional. Ms. Bennett, thank you for coming in on such short notice. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please sit. Can I get you some coffee? Water. Water is fine, thank you. She sat down, set her tote bag on the floor beside her, and folded her hands in her lap. Her palms were slightly damp. She'd spent years imagining this moment, playing it over and over in her head at 3 a.m. when she couldn't sleep. Now that it was here, it felt surreal. Inspector Nash sat down across from her and pressed a button on the recorder. This is Inspector Liam Nash, interviewing Ms. Clara Bennett regarding allegations of tax fraud at Voss Innovations. Time is 3:17 p.m., November 14th. He looked up at her, his gaze sharp but not unkind. Ms. Bennett, you stated on the phone that the total estimated tax evasion is $9.5 million over 6 years. That is an extremely serious claim. I need to be clear with you, if this proceeds to prosecution, you will be required to testify under oath. If any of your claims are proven false, you could face perjury charges and civil penalties. Do you understand that? I understand. Clara leaned down, unzipped her bag, and pulled out a matte black encrypted USB drive. She set it on the table between them. That contains the full digital record, all organized by year, by transaction type, by amount. I have cross-referenced every entry with bank statements, invoice records, and internal communications. There are no gaps. Inspector Nash picked up the drive and turned it over in his fingers, like he was weighing it. He plugged it into his work laptop and typed in a few commands. His eyebrows climbed higher and higher as he scrolled through the folder structure, his thumb slowing as he opened the first spreadsheet. 2019 Fraudulent Vendor Invoice Log, 2020 Unreported Cash Revenue Ledger, 2021 Related Party Shell Company Transaction Records. He trailed off, looking up at her, his expression shifting from professional skepticism to frank astonishment. Ms. Bennett, this is not a tip. This is a full forensic audit. You compiled all of this yourself. I was the finance manager for 6 years, she said quietly. I processed almost every single one of these transactions personally. From 2019 through the current fiscal year, Voss Innovations evaded approximately $4.2 million in federal and state income tax through falsified vendor invoices and inflated expense reports. Another $3.1 million was hidden through unreported cash revenue held in 3 separate off-the-books bank accounts. And roughly $2.2 million was siphoned out through controlled shell companies and related party transactions to avoid corporate tax. It adds up to approximately $9.5 million total, plus interest and penalties. Inspector Nash leaned forward, scrolling rapidly through the spreadsheets, scribbling notes in his leather notebook as he went. Every few seconds, he'd pause and click open a scanned document, an invoice, an email, a signed directive, and nod to himself. After almost 20 minutes, he leaned back in his chair and pulled off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "This is remarkably thorough," he said, his voice quieter now, with a note of respect. "Most whistleblowers bring us a handful of suspicious emails or a single ledger page with a few gaps. You've given us a step-by-step roadmap to every dollar. How did you maintain access to all of this without raising suspicion?" Clara's jaw tightened slightly. "I was the one entering most of it into the system. Harold Voss and Priscilla Drake, his CFO, personally directed every fraudulent entry. I have written email directives from both of them for nearly every major transaction. They trusted me to make the numbers work. They never thought I'd keep a record. Why wait 6 years?" The question was soft, not accusatory. Just curious. For a second, Clara's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, folded neatly in her lap, and took a slow, steadying breath. She'd told this story to exactly no one. Not even her mom. Really, her mom had known there was something wrong at work, but Clara had never told her the details. She'd never wanted to add to her worry. "My mother had lung cancer," she said finally, her voice steady but quiet. "She was diagnosed my first year at Voss. For 6 years, she was in and out of treatment, chemo, targeted therapy, hospital stays, palliative care. It was incredibly expensive. I had good insurance, but it didn't cover everything. The copays, the experimental drugs, the in-home care, it all added up." She paused, swallowing past the lump in her throat. "I couldn't lose this job. I couldn't risk being blacklisted. I needed the insurance, I needed the paycheck, I needed stability for her. So I stayed. I did what they told me. But I kept records. Because I knew someday I wouldn't have to stay anymore." Inspector Nash nodded slowly. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just waited, quiet and respectful, for her to continue. "She died last month," Clara said. The words still felt strange coming out of her mouth, like they belonged to someone else's life. "I took 3 days off to arrange the funeral. When I came back, I wrote my resignation letter." The room was quiet for a long moment. The only sound was the low hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. "I'm sorry for your loss," Inspector Nash said finally, his voice genuine. She nodded once. She didn't want pity. She wanted this over with. "Ms. Bennett," he said, leaning forward again, his tone crisp and professional once more, "if we move forward with a full investigation and prosecution, this will not be fast. There will be depositions, pretrial motions, possibly a trial. Voss will hire expensive defense lawyers. They will try to discredit you. They will dig into your personal life, your employment history, every choice you've made for the last 6 years. It will be hard. It will be stressful. Are you prepared for that?" "I'm prepared," she said, and she meant it. 6 years of carrying this secret had prepared her for almost anything. "And I would advise you to move quickly. Harold Voss is careful. He's destroyed records before when he thought someone was asking too many questions. If he gets even a hint that we're looking into the books, he will shred every paper record and wipe every server. He won't hesitate." "We'll move fast," Inspector Nash said. He stood and held out a hand. "And for what it's worth, under state tax law, qualifying whistleblowers are eligible for a reward of up to 10% of the total funds recovered. If every dollar you've documented is recovered, that would be close to $1 million. Clara shook her head, a small, bitter smile tugging at her mouth. "Inspector, I didn't spend 6 years collecting evidence for a payout." She left the Revenue Building as the sun was dipping low in the sky, painting the concrete walls in streaks of pink and orange. She hailed a cab for home, leaning her head back against the seat and watching the city pass by the window. Streetlights flickered on one by one. People hurried along the sidewalks, heading home from work, stopping for coffee, laughing with friends. For a second, she felt like she was watching life from behind a pane of glass, like she'd been on the outside looking in for 6 years, and only now was she stepping through. Her apartment was on the 12th floor of a quiet brick building on the west side. It was small, just one bedroom and a tiny dining nook, but it was hers. She'd never decorated much, never had the time, never had the energy, always thought she'd do it later, when things settled down. Now things were settling. Finally. She dragged 3 heavy cardboard file boxes out of the back of her bedroom closet and set them on the dining room table. They'd been there, tucked away behind her winter coats, for years. She'd added to them every month, carefully, quietly, making sure no one ever saw. She flipped open the lid of the first box. 2019. The top folder held the first set of fake invoices she'd ever been told to process. She remembered that month so clearly. The company had just landed its first big government contract, $5 million, more money than the company had made in the entire previous year. Harold had called her into his office, grinning like he'd won the lottery, and told her to bring the effective tax rate down to 10%. She'd pushed back at first. "Mr. Voss, this contract is fully transparent. All the payments are on the books, all the vendors are registered. There's no legitimate way to get it that low." He'd stopped smiling. "I didn't ask you if it was legitimate. I asked you to get it done. That's what I pay you for. If you can't handle it, I'll find someone who can." She'd thought about her mom, waiting for test results at the hospital. She'd thought about her bank account, with barely $800 in it. She'd thought about what would happen if she lost this job, if she lost her insurance. She'd done it. She'd found shell vendors, created fake invoices, padded the expense reports. She'd brought the tax rate down to 9.8%. Harold had praised her, told her she was a real team player. That night, she'd sat in the hospital cafeteria while her mom slept upstairs, and she'd cried into a cup of bad vending machine coffee until her eyes were red and swollen. She'd felt dirty. Like she'd sold a piece of herself for a paycheck. That was the night she'd started keeping the files. She'd gone home at 10 p.m., printed out every single fraudulent invoice, every email, every bank record, and put them in a manila folder labeled Office Supplies 2019. She'd hidden it at the back of her closet. At the time, she hadn't known why she was doing it. She'd just known she couldn't let it all disappear. That she couldn't be the only one who knew the truth. She flipped through the folders, one by one. 2019 bled into 2020. The pandemic had shut down half the city. Small businesses were folding left and right. People were losing their jobs and their homes, and Voss Innovations had boomed. Remote work software contracts, government tech grants, money had poured in. Harold had bought himself a Porsche 911, jet black, custom interior. Priscilla had bought a 4,200 square foot penthouse downtown, views of the river, all cash. Clara had gotten an $800 a year raise. "Tough year for all of us," Harold had said at the all-hands Zoom meeting, his face solemn. "We all have to make sacrifices. But next year, when things turn around, we'll make it up to you. Big bonuses for everyone." Clara had stared at her screen, at his tailored shirt and his expensive watch, and she'd known he was lying. She'd seen the real numbers. The company had cleared over $20 million in profit that year. More than half of it had never touched the official books. The third box covered 2021 through the current year. Harold's schemes had gotten bolder, more elaborate. 3 separate shell companies, all registered to distant relatives of his, bouncing money back and forth between accounts to hide profits and avoid taxes. Every quarter, the numbers got bigger, the lies got thicker, and Clara's stack of evidence grew taller. She spent 2 hours reorganizing everything, adding color-coded sticky notes to mark the most damning documents, cross-referencing paper files with the digital records on the USB drive. She wrote a table of contents for each box, a quick reference guide so the investigators could find exactly what they needed without digging for hours. By the time she was done, the sun was fully down, and her apartment was dark except for the lamp over the table. She loaded the 3 boxes into the back of her old Honda Civic and drove back to the Revenue Building. The night security guard gave her a strange look when she hauled them through the lobby, each box heavy enough to make her arms ache. "Inspector Nash is expecting me," she said. He was. Nash was still in his office, the lights on, a half-empty mug of black coffee on his desk, crumpled candy wrappers scattered beside it. He called 2 agents to help carry the boxes back to the conference room. "Miss Bennett, you really didn't have to bring all this tonight," he said, but he was already flipping open the top box, his eyes scanning the neatly labeled folders. He pulled out the 2020 off-the-books ledger, flipped through a few pages, and whistled softly. This is incredible. Most cases this size take us months just to find the trail. You've handed us the whole map." "I had a lot of time to work on it," she said simply. 6 years. He looked up at her, his glasses slipping down his nose, and there was something like admiration in his eyes. "You're a woman of principle, Miss Bennett. A lot of people would have just taken the paycheck and looked the other way. A lot of people do. Someone had to do it," she said. It sounded lame, even to her. But it was the truth. "For what it's worth," he said, "we will take this all the way. Every last dollar. Every person responsible. You have my word." She left the building close to 11 p.m. The streets were quiet, the streetlights glowing golden in the dark. She stood on the steps for a minute, breathing in the cold night air, and felt a weight lift off her shoulders that she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten it was there. She pulled out her phone and opened her text thread with her mom. The last message she'd sent was a month ago, the night before her mom died, "Working late tonight. I'll bring your favorite soup tomorrow, okay?" Her mom's reply was underneath it, sent at 9:42 p.m., her typing slow and careful with her thin, cold fingers. "Drive safe, baby. I'll leave the porch light on for you." Clara stared at the screen for a long time. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard for a minute, and then she typed slowly, one letter at a time. "I did it, Mom. I didn't let them push me around anymore. I stood up." She hit send. She knew there would be no reply. The phone line would be disconnected soon, if it wasn't already. But she also knew, somewhere, her mom was listening. Somewhere, she was smiling. Her phone buzzed in her hand a minute later. A text from an unknown number, Inspector Nash, from the card he'd given her. "Initial review confirms evidence is solid. We're executing a surprise audit and warrant at Boss Innovations first thing tomorrow morning. Stay by your phone. We may need you on site to locate records." She typed back, "Got it. I'll be ready." Then she turned off her phone, walked upstairs to her apartment, and crawled into bed. She didn't set an alarm. She didn't need to. She slept deeper that night than she had in 6 years. No nightmares about fake invoices, no cold sweats about getting caught, no jolting awake at 3 a.m. worrying about her mom. Just quiet. Just peace. Tomorrow, the fight would begin. Her phone rang at 9:02 a.m. sharp the next morning. She was sitting at her kitchen table drinking coffee, going over her resume for the first time in 6 years, when the screen lit up with Inspector Nash's name. She picked up immediately. "Ms. Bennett? We're on site at Voss Innovations now." His voice was calm and steady, but Clara could hear raised voices in the background, Harold's, loud and blustering, and Priscilla's, shrill with panic. "The filing system is deliberately convoluted, and they're stonewalling us on the 2020 Shell Company records. We need you here to walk us through the physical file locations. Can you get here quickly?" "I'm on my way." She hung up, stood up, and walked to her closet. She pulled out the sharp charcoal wool suit she'd bought for her mom's funeral, the only nice suit she owned, and slipped it on. She brushed her hair back into a neat low bun, applied a minimal amount of makeup, and stared at herself in the bathroom mirror for a long moment. The woman looking back had dark circles under her eyes and a faint scar above her right eyebrow from a childhood bike accident. But her spine was straight. Her chin was held high. There was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there in a very long time. She didn't look like the quiet, accommodating finance manager who'd walked out of Voss Innovations the day before. She looked like someone who knew exactly what she was doing, and exactly what she was worth. She took an Uber to the Voss building and spotted the 2 unmarked government sedans parked out front before she even got out of the car. The lobby was buzzing with murmurs, employees clustered in small groups by the elevators, all craning their necks upward, whispers rippling through the crowd like wind through grass. The receptionist was on the phone, her face pale, nodding frantically at whoever was on the other end of the line. Clara walked straight past the front desk without stopping. "Miss Bennett." The receptionist's voice was shocked, almost disbelieving. "I thought you quit yesterday?" "I'm here to assist with the state audit," she said flatly, and pressed the button for the 12th floor. The finance department floor was sealed off when the elevator doors slid open. 2 uniformed agents stood guard by the entrance, their expressions impassive. Inside, half a dozen investigators in plain clothes moved between cubicles, pulling stacks of paper from file cabinets, scanning documents into portable laptops, tagging boxes of records with evidence tape. Inspector Nash stood in the middle of the room, talking into his phone. He looked up when he saw her, ended the call, and walked over. "Thanks for getting here so fast." He nodded toward Harold's office, where raised voices were still audible. "Voss and Drake are in there, screaming about warrants and privacy violations. They're refusing to open the locked file cabinet in the supply closet, said it's personal executive records. I'm guessing that's where the off-the-book stuff is." "Third shelf, behind the printer paper," Clara said without hesitation. "There's a false back panel. The key is in the top drawer of Harold's desk under a pack of gum. Mint flavor." Inspector Nash raised an eyebrow. "You know a lot about the inside of his desk." "6 years of fetching things for him," she said dryly. "You learn where people hide things." He gestured for one of the agents to go check. Less than 5 minutes later, the agent came back, hefting a thick stack of black binders, his eyes wide. "Nash? You're gonna want to see this." Full off the book's ledgers, all handwritten. Bank statements for 3 different accounts we didn't even know existed. Gold mine. Inspector Nash grinned, sharp and satisfied. "Nice work, Miss Bennett." He led her down the hall to Harold's corner office, pushing the door open without knocking. The room was thick with tension. Harold was standing behind his desk, his face purple with rage, his tie askew, sweat beading on his forehead. Priscilla was perched on the edge of the desk, her arms crossed tight over her chest, her lipstick smudged like she'd been biting her lip. Both of them looked like they'd been screaming. They both looked up when the door opened. Harold's eyes locked on Clara. For a split second, he looked confused. Then he understood. And his face twisted with a rage so intense it was almost ugly. "Clara." He stepped out from behind the desk, his voice low and dangerous. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I'm here to assist the state audit," she said calmly. She didn't flinch. She didn't step back. "Assist the audit?" Priscilla's voice rose to a shrill shriek. "You did this. You ratted us out. You went to the IRS, you little backstabbing bitch." "Ms. Drake, watch your tone," Inspector Nash said, stepping forward slightly. "Ms. Bennett is a cooperating witness. Any further harassment or intimidation will result in additional charges." "Harassing?" "She's destroying our company." Priscilla's voice was cracking now, panic seeping through the anger. "Harold, do something." "She can't just." "Ms. Bennett," Inspector Nash said, speaking over her, "can you confirm for the record where the July 2020 batch of fraudulent vendor invoices was filed?" "The ones from Apex Office Supplies and Global Tech Solutions. Those were filed under General Operating Expenses in the Finance Records Room," Clara said, her voice clear and steady. "3rd row, 5th cabinet, blue binders. They're labeled as office supply vendors, but both companies are empty shells with no physical operations or employees." One of the agents standing by the wall nodded and headed for the records room. He was back in less than 5 minutes, carrying a stack of thick blue binders. He set them down on the desk with a heavy thud. Inspector Nash flipped open the top binder and pulled out a handful of invoices, glancing between them and a printout in his hand. He looked up at Harold, his expression cold. "Mr. Voss, both of these vendors have no active business license, no physical address, and no payroll records. They're registered to a P.O. box in a strip mall 2 towns over. Between 2019 and 2022, Voss Innovations paid over $3.8 million to these 2 companies for services rendered that don't exist. Can you explain that?" I don't know what you're talking about, Harold stammered. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. That's all finance department day-to-day. I don't handle the bookkeeping. I run the company. You don't. Clara spoke up, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. Mr. Voss, July 15th, 2020, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You sat right there in that leather chair, and you said to me, and I quote, Clara, we can't get real invoices for this subcontractor batch. Find some blank vendor accounts to fill the gap. The IRS never audits small software firms. They'll never notice. You don't remember that. Harold's face went completely white. That's a lie. I never said any such thing. You're making this up to get back at me for the laptop fee. Am I? Clara reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a small, silver digital voice recorder. She set it on the desk between them. I recorded it. I recorded all of it. Every meeting, every directive, every time you told me to cook the books. The room went completely silent. Priscilla's mouth fell open. She stared at the little silver recorder like it was a snake, like it was going to bite her. You were recording us? For 6 years. Every time you told me to break the law, Clara said, looking directly at her. Every time you threatened to fire me if I didn't go along with it. Every time you said no one would ever find out. I recorded all of it. Inspector Nash picked up the recorder and pressed play. Harold's voice filled the room, clear as day, arrogant and sharp, telling her exactly how to hide the revenue, exactly which shell companies to use, exactly how to make it all look legitimate. Then Priscilla's voice, sharp and cold, telling her to keep her mouth shut, telling her she was replaceable, telling her no one would believe her if she talked. The recording ended. The room was dead quiet. Harold looked like he was going to be sick. Priscilla swayed on her feet, and she reached out to grab the edge of the desk to steady herself. Well, Mr. Voss? Miss Drake. Inspector Nash said, closing his notebook. Do either of you have any further explanation for this evidence? Harold collapsed back into his leather chair, all the fight draining out of him in an instant. He stared at Clara, his eyes burning with a hatred so deep it was almost tangible. You, he said, his voice low and venomous. You ungrateful little bitch. I gave you a job. I gave you a career. And you stabbed me in the back like this? You gave me a job so I could help you steal millions from the government, Clara said, her voice steady. She leaned forward slightly, looking him dead in the eye. You used my skills to line your own pockets while my mom was dying in a hospital bed, worrying about how we were going to pay for her pills. You thought I was just a quiet little accountant who'd do whatever you said. You were wrong. You'll regret this, Harold snarled. You think you walk away from this clean? I know people in this city. I have connections. I will ruin you. You'll never work in finance again. You'll never work anywhere again. Is that a threat, Mr. Voss? Inspector Nash said, his voice sharp. Because threatening a witness in an active criminal investigation is a separate felony. Harold snapped his mouth shut. But his eyes never left Clara's face. Full of hate. Full of rage. Priscilla suddenly lurched forward, pointing a finger at Clara, her nails long and red and sharp. Wait a minute. She's the one who did all the bookkeeping. She's the finance manager. She planned all of this. She's the mastermind, not us. We had no idea what she was doing. She manipulated the books behind our backs. Clara almost laughed. She'd known Priscilla would try to throw her under the bus. She'd been ready for it for years. Miss Drake, she said, cool as ice, every single fraudulent transaction required a signed approval from both you and Mr. Voss. Every check over $10,000 needed 2 signatures. The company bank accounts require your authorization to access. The shell companies are all registered to Mr. Voss's cousins. If I was the mastermind, what exactly was my cut? A $1,200 a year raise? A corner cubicle? Inspector Nash nodded. Our preliminary review confirms that Ms. Bennett was a mid-level employee acting under direct executive order. Her decision to come forward with full evidence is considered substantial cooperation, which will be noted in the case file. Priscilla's face went ashen. She looked at Harold, wild-eyed and desperate. Harold, tell them. Tell them it wasn't my fault. You told me to do it. You said it was fine. Harold didn't even look at her. He just stared at Clara, his jaw tight, his eyes black with hate. At that moment, the office door creaked open. A small crowd of employees had gathered in the hallway, peeking in, their phones out, whispering furiously to each other. Clara could see the shock on their faces, the confusion, the slow dawning realization that everything they'd thought they knew about the company was a lie. "Holy shit," someone muttered. "They really were stealing?" Clara reported them. No wonder Voss was being such a dick to her yesterday. $9.5 million? That's years in prison. Wow. Priscilla heard them. Her face twisted with humiliation and rage. She opened her mouth to scream at them, but Inspector Nash held up a hand. "Mr. Voss, Ms. Drake," he said, his voice formal and final, "you are being placed under investigative custody for suspicion of conspiracy to commit tax fraud, money laundering, and filing false financial statements. You will be transported to the downtown precinct for booking and formal charges. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Two uniformed officers stepped forward and cuffed them both. Priscilla made a small, strangled sound, like she couldn't believe this was actually happening. Harold didn't make a sound. He just kept staring at Clara, his eyes burning, as the officers led him out of the office. They walked down the hallway, past all the staring employees. The whole floor went dead quiet. No one said a word. Everyone just watched, eyes wide, as the CEO and CFO of Voss Innovations were led out in handcuffs. Clara stood in the doorway of Harold's office and watched them go. 6 years of anger, 6 years of humiliation, 6 years of quiet resentment, all of it rose up in her chest for a split second, sharp and hot. And then it was gone. Just like that. It didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like revenge. It just felt over. Inspector Nash walked over and stood beside her. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she said. And for the first time in a very long time, she actually meant it. Over the next 3 days, Clara spent almost every waking hour at the Revenue Building, giving formal statements, walking investigators through spreadsheets, identifying signatures, and cross-referencing bank records. Inspector Nash and his team worked around the clock, verifying every dollar, cross-checking every account, building an airtight case. Every time they confirmed another batch of fraud, Harold's legal jeopardy grew deeper. On the 4th day, she stepped out of the building for a lunch break when her phone rang with an unknown number. She hesitated for half a second, then answered. "Clara Bennett?" The voice on the other end was male, middle-aged, with a faint, nervous edge to it, like he was trying very hard to sound casual and friendly and failing. "This is William Caldwell. I'm a minority shareholder at Voss Innovations, 30% stake. I don't know if you remember me." She remembered him. William Caldwell was a silent partner, an old college friend of Harold's who'd put up seed money back in the early days, and then vanished to live abroad. He showed up once a year for the shareholder meeting, collected his dividend check, and left. He never asked questions. He never wanted details. "Mr. Caldwell, what can I do for you?" "Look, Clara, can I call you Clara?" He laughed, a nervous, breathy sound. "I'm sure you're busy, so I'll cut to the chase. Harold's mess has the whole company falling apart. We've got clients jumping ship left and right, vendors screaming about unpaid invoices, total chaos. I need someone to step in and steady the ship, someone who knows the books inside and out. I want you to come back as CFO." Clara blinked. She actually laughed a little, sharp and disbelieving. "Mr. Caldwell, you're aware I'm the one who reported the company for $9.5 million in tax fraud, right?" "Hey, that was Harold's fault, not yours," he said quickly, like he'd been practicing this line. "I had no idea any of that was going on. I was living in Spain, enjoying retirement, trusting Harold to run things. I'm a victim here, too." "A victim?" Clara's voice went cold. "Mr. Caldwell, you collected $1.2 million in dividends in 2020 alone. How much of that money do you think came from unpaid taxes? You never asked questions because you didn't want to know. You were happy to cash the checks." There was a long, awkward silence on the other end of the line. "Look," he said finally, his voice dropping, all the fake friendliness gone. "Name your price. How much do you want to walk away?" To drop the whole thing? $500,000? A million? Whatever you want, just name it. Mr. Caldwell, she said, slow and clear, this is a criminal prosecution. It's not a civil suit I can drop. The state is pressing charges. The IRS is pressing charges. My opinion doesn't matter anymore. And even if it did, I wouldn't take your money. Wait, hold on. She hung up. She blocked the number. She put her phone back in her pocket and walked to the sandwich shop down the street. That night, she got home late, tired but satisfied, and found someone standing on her doorstep. It was Priscilla. She was wearing a plain black coat, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked 10 years older than she had 3 days ago. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying for hours. When she saw Clara coming up the stairs, she practically threw herself forward, grabbing Clara's arm with cold, shaking hands. Clara. Her voice was raw, broken, thick with tears. Clara, please. You have to help me. You have to get me out of this. Clara gently pulled her arm free. Ms. Drake. You should leave. No, wait, please. Priscilla's voice cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, leaving streaks in the pale skin. I can't go to prison. I have a daughter in college. I have a sick mother. I can't go to jail. They'll ruin my life. They'll take my license. I'll never work again. Miss Drake, this isn't my decision, Clara said, steady but not unkind. The charges are filed. The evidence is public. There's nothing I can do to make them go away. There is. Priscilla grabbed her hands, squeezing tight, desperate. You can tell them I was forced. You can say Harold threatened me, that he made me do it. You can say I had no choice. They'll believe you. You're the star witness. If you say I was just following orders. Just following orders? Clara repeated. She looked at Priscilla, at her tear-streaked face, at her expensive coat and her diamond earrings, and she thought about 3 years ago, the worst day of her life. She thought about the day her mom had been admitted to the ICU with pneumonia on top of the chemo. The doctor had called her at work at 10 in the morning, voice urgent, and told her to get to the hospital right away. She'd run to Priscilla's office, breathless, terrified, and asked for half a day off. Priscilla had looked up from her desk, cold and sharp, and said, Clara, we're in the middle of quarter-end close. This is not a good time. The company doesn't pay you to take random days off whenever you feel like it. If you can't handle your responsibilities, maybe this isn't the right job for you. Clara had begged. She'd told her about the ICU, about her mom's cancer, about how scared she was. Priscilla had just rolled her eyes and told her to take 2 hours, max, and be back by 3 for the reconciliation meeting. She'd made it to the hospital for 45 minutes. She'd held her mom's hand while she slept, and then she'd had to leave because she was afraid of losing her job. Afraid of losing her insurance. Afraid of what Priscilla would do. She'd cried the whole drive back to the office. Do you remember March of 2021? Clara said, her voice quiet but sharp. My mom was in the ICU with pneumonia. I came to your office, crying, begging for half a day off. You told me the company didn't pay for people with personal problems. You gave me 2 hours. You told me if I wasn't back by 3, I'd be written up. Priscilla froze. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. You told me I was replaceable, Clara said. You told me to stop being dramatic. You told me to get back to work. Do you remember that? I was just doing my job, Priscilla whispered. Her face was white now. Harold said we had to hit the deadline. You were cruel, Clara said. You didn't have to be. You chose to be. Because it made you feel powerful. Because you knew I couldn't fight back. And now that the tables are turned, you want me to feel sorry for you. Priscilla's shoulders shook. She sank down onto the top step of the porch, her face in her hands, and sobbed. Big, heaving, ugly sobs, the kind that come when everything falls apart. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice muffled by her hands. I'm so sorry. I was awful to you. I know I was. But please don't let me go to prison. I'll do anything. I'll testify against Harold. I'll tell them everything. Just help me. Clara looked down at her. For a split second, she felt a flicker of something like pity. This woman had spent 6 years making her life miserable, lording her power over her, cutting her down at every opportunity. And now here she was, broken and crying on her doorstep, begging for mercy. But mercy wasn't Clara's to give. "Testify against Harold," she said finally. "Cooperate fully. Tell the truth about everything. That's the only thing that will help you. Not me. Not begging. Just the truth." She stepped around her and unlocked her front door. She paused in the doorway, looking back. "Go home, Ms. Drake. Get a lawyer. And stop trying to blame everyone but yourself." She closed the door behind her. She leaned back against it, eyes closed, and let out a long, slow breath. Through the door, she could hear Priscilla cry for a few more minutes. Then she heard the sound of heels on concrete, fading away down the sidewalk. Clara pushed off the door and walked into her kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking out at the streetlights. She didn't feel good about it. She didn't feel triumphant. But she didn't feel bad either. People made their choices. They had to live with them. 2 weeks later, Inspector Nash called her with an update. "Ms. Bennett? Good news. The full audit is complete. The final verified total of evaded taxes is $9,530,000. Harold Voss and Priscilla Drake have both been indicted by the grand jury on 15 counts each: tax fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, filing false statements. The case is going to trial in 2 months." "Okay," Clara said. She was sitting at her kitchen table, scrolling through job listings. She'd been applying for finance positions, but most of the recruiters who reached out only wanted to ask about the Voss case. She was starting to wonder if she'd ever have a normal career again. Also, Inspector Nash said, his tone lighter, the reward has been approved. 10% of the total recovered amount per state statute. That comes to $953,000. The check will be mailed to you within 10 business days. Clara blinked. $953,000. That was more money than she'd made in her entire 6 years at Voss Innovations combined. That was enough to pay off every last medical bill from her mom's treatment. Enough to put a down payment on a house. Enough to never have to worry about money again for a very long time. She thought she'd feel excited. She thought she'd feel relieved. But mostly, she just felt empty. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Also, the DA's office wants to confirm that you'll be available to testify as the primary witness for the prosecution," Nash said. "The trial is scheduled for the first Monday of next month at the county courthouse." "I'll be there," she said. "I'll testify." She hung up the phone and sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. $953,000. It was a life-changing amount of money. But it didn't bring her mom back. It didn't give her back the 6 years she'd spent being someone she didn't want to be. Her phone rang again a minute later. This time, the caller ID was a name she hadn't seen in years: Professor Eleanor Hayes. Eleanor Hayes had been her senior thesis advisor in college, the woman who'd encouraged her to get her CPA, who'd told her she had the talent and the integrity to be one of the best in the field. Clara had lost touch with her after graduation, buried under work and her mom's illness, too ashamed of what she'd become at Voss to reach out. She picked up immediately. "Professor Hayes? Clara. It's so good to hear your voice." The professor's voice was warm, familiar, exactly like Clara remembered. "I saw the news about Voss Innovations. I knew it was you the second I read the story. I always knew you'd do the right thing." Clara's throat tightened. "Thank you. That means a lot." "Listen, I'm calling because I have a proposition for you," Professor Hayes said. "An old colleague of mine is the CFO at Haleworth Corporation. They're one of the largest private firms in the state, and they're looking for a new deputy director of finance to head up their audit and compliance division. I told him all about you, your technical skills, your professional ethics, your backbone. He's very interested in meeting you." Haleworth Corporation. Clara knew the name. Everyone in the industry knew the name. They were a Fortune 500 company, clean as a whistle, famous for their strict compliance standards and their reputation for treating employees well. It was the kind of company she dreamed of working for straight out of college, before everything had happened. "Professor, I'm flattered," but she hesitated. With the trial coming up and all the press. I'm not sure any big company would want to hire me right now. There's a lot of baggage. Baggage? Professor Hayes laughed, warm and bright. Clara, that's not baggage. That's proof of character. Any company worth working for would kill to have someone with your principles in their finance department. Haleworth specifically wants someone who isn't afraid to find problems and call them out. That's exactly who you are. Clara sat there, her heart beating a little faster. For the first time since she'd quit Voss, she let herself feel something like hope. Okay, she said. I'll meet with him. Wonderful. Professor Hayes sounded delighted. I'll send you his contact info. He wants to meet you tomorrow afternoon, 2:30, at Haleworth Tower. His name is Margaret Hale. Wait, no. Arthur Hale is the CEO. Margaret Hale is the CFO. Yes, Margaret Hale. She's a brilliant woman. You two will get along great. Thank you, Professor, Clara said, and she meant it from the bottom of her heart. Really? Thank you. Nonsense. You earned this, Clara. Now go show them what you're made of. The next afternoon, Clara arrived at Haleworth Tower 10 minutes early. The building was a 30-story glass and steel skyscraper in the heart of the central business district, sleek and modern, with a lobby so tall it felt like a cathedral. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a reception desk staffed by 2 people in crisp tailored blazers. People hurried back and forth, all professional, all purposeful, the air humming with quiet energy. Clara adjusted the sleeve of her blazer and walked up to the front desk. Good afternoon. I'm Clara Bennett. I have a 2:30 meeting with Miss Hale. The receptionist smiled, checked her calendar, and handed her a printed visitor badge. Miss Hale is on the 20th floor. Please go right up. She's expecting you. The elevator ride up was quiet. Clara watched the numbers climb, one by one, and felt a faint flutter of nervousness in her stomach. She hadn't had a job interview in 6 years. She'd forgotten what it felt like to sell herself, to prove she was worth hiring. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't begging for a job because she needed it to survive. This time, she was there because they wanted her. Because of who she was, not just what she could do. The elevator doors slid open on the 20th floor. Margaret Hale's administrative assistant met her by the doors and led her down a hallway lined with framed awards and press clippings to a corner office with a sweeping view of the river. Margaret Hale stood when she walked in. She was in her late 50s, with short salt and pepper hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a sharp, intelligent face. She wore a simple navy blazer and slacks, no jewelry except a thin silver watch. She held out a hand, her grip firm and confident. Miss Bennett, it's a pleasure to meet you. Eleanor has told me so much about you. Thank you for making time for me, Miss Hale. Clara shook her hand. Please call me Clara. Margaret, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Please sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea? Coffee is fine, thank you. Black. Margaret poured 2 cups of coffee from a carafe on the side table and sat down behind her desk. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze direct but not intimidating. Eleanor tells me you're one of the most technically gifted students she ever taught, she said. CPA at 22, 6 years of hands-on finance management experience, and the integrity to blow the whistle on $9.5 million in fraud even when it would have been easier to just walk away. That's rare. Clara nodded. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one. I know it wasn't. Margaret's voice was quiet, sincere. Most people don't make that choice. Most people look the other way, especially when they have something to lose. She flipped open Clara's resume, which was printed out on the desk in front of her, and scanned it quickly. Your technical skills are impeccable. There's no question about that. But what I'm more interested in is your philosophy. What does financial integrity mean to you? Clara thought about it for a second. She thought about her mom, about the hospital bills, about the 6 years she'd spent looking away, about the night she'd decided she couldn't look away anymore. It means sleeping well at night, she said finally. It means every number on every spreadsheet is real. It means when you sign your name at the bottom of a report, you don't have to cross your fingers and hope no one looks too close. I spent 6 years working somewhere where that wasn't possible. I don't want to do that again. I'd rather make less money and be proud of what I do than make more and feel like I'm selling a little piece of myself every day. Margaret watched her expression unreadable, for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, sharp and decisive. Good, she said. That's exactly the answer I was hoping for. Clara, Haleworth has been around for 22 years. We've grown from a 3-person startup to a $3 billion company. And we've done it all clean. No shell games, no off-the-books accounts, no cutting corners. Our founder, Arthur Hale, says a company that cheats on its taxes will cheat its employees, its customers, and its partners. And he's right. She leaned back in her chair. The Deputy Director of Finance position will head up our internal audit and compliance division. You'll have a team of 12 people. You'll be responsible for every financial process across all 12 of our subsidiaries. You'll find problems. You'll fix them. You'll ruffle feathers. And you'll have my full backing to do it, no matter who it upsets. She paused, looking Clara straight in the eye. The base salary is $180,000 a year, plus annual bonus and full benefits. 3 weeks of paid vacation, plus 10 sick days. Full health, dental, and vision. A 401k with 6% match. Does that sound acceptable to you? Clara's breath caught. $180,000 a year. That was almost 3 times what she'd been making at Boss Innovations. But more than the money, it was the chance to do the work she'd always wanted to do, the right way. To build something clean. To be proud of going to work every morning. More than acceptable, she said, and she couldn't keep the small smile off her face. I'd be honored to join the team. Margaret smiled back, a rare, warm smile. Welcome aboard, Clara. We're lucky to have you. They talked for another 20 minutes about start dates, about the upcoming trial, about the team she'd be managing. Margaret told her to take all the time she needed for the trial. Haleworth would hold the position for her. She said they wanted her there long term, and a few months of transition was nothing. Clara left the Haleworth building with her head spinning. She walked down the front steps, out into the bright afternoon sun, and stood there for a minute, just breathing. 6 months ago, she'd been sitting at her cubicle at Voss, wondering if she'd ever escape, wondering if she'd spend the rest of her life trapped, making money for a man who didn't deserve it, just to keep her mom alive. Now her mom was gone. But she was free. And she had a new job, at a company that valued her for exactly who she was. She pulled out her phone and called Professor Hayes. I got the job, she said, and her voice wavered a little. I knew you would. Professor Hayes sounded thrilled. Clara, I'm so proud of you. You deserve every bit of this. Thank you, Clara said. She blinked back tears. Really? For everything. After the call, she walked to the park down the street and sat on a bench for a long time. She watched kids play on the playground, watched people walk their dogs, watched couples hold hands and laugh. For the first time in a very long time, she felt like she was part of the world again. Not just watching it from the sidelines. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur. She met with the prosecution team 3 times to prepare for trial, going over every piece of evidence, practicing testimony, running through cross-examination scenarios. She started the onboarding process at Haleworth, meeting her team, reviewing company policies, getting up to speed on their systems. She bought a new couch for her apartment and a real dining room table and a set of nice dishes. Small things. Normal things. Things she'd never had the energy to care about before. The trial started on the first Monday of the next month at the county courthouse downtown. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back row, notebooks and cameras at the ready. Local business owners, finance professionals, curious members of the public, all of them had showed up to watch the trial of the decade. The Voss Innovations fraud case had been all over the local news for weeks. Clara sat in the witness waiting room for an hour before they called her. She sat still, hands folded in her lap, breathing slowly. She wasn't nervous. She was ready. When the bailiff called her name, she stood up and walked into the courtroom. All eyes turned to her. The flash of cameras went off in quick, bright bursts. She walked past the defense table, where Harold and Priscilla sat next to their expensive lawyers. Harold stared at her, his face cold and hard. Priscilla looked away. She took the stand, raised her right hand, and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The prosecuting attorney stood up, a tall woman in a dark gray suit, and walked her through the basics. Her name, her job title, how long she'd worked at Voss Innovations. "Ms. Bennett," the prosecutor said, turning to face her, "can you describe for the court the nature of the fraudulent activity you witnessed at Voss Innovations?" Clara took a slow, steady breath. "Starting in early 2019, she said, her voice clear and steady, Harold Voss and Priscilla Drake began directing me to systematically falsify the company's financial records in order to reduce its tax liability. The fraud took three primary forms. First, falsified vendor invoices to inflate business expenses and reduce reported profit. Second, unreported cash and digital revenue held in off-the-books bank accounts, never declared on tax filings. Third, controlled shell companies used to siphon profits out of the business through fake service agreements, avoiding corporate and personal income tax." She went on, detail by detail, number by number. She walked the court through every year, every major scheme, every dollar. She identified emails, invoices, voice recordings, bank statements. The prosecutor asked question after question, and she answered every one of them clearly, precisely, without hesitation. Then it was the defense's turn. Harold's lawyer stood up, a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit, and walked slowly toward the witness stand. "Ms. Bennett," he said, his voice smooth and low, "you were the finance manager at Voss Innovations for 6 years. You were the one entering all of these numbers into the system. You were the one signing off on the reports. Isn't that true?" "Yes." "Isn't it true that you could have stopped this at any time?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "You could have gone to the authorities at any point in those 6 years. But you didn't. You stayed. You collected a paycheck. You helped. And then, when you got fired." "I wasn't fired. I resigned." "When you decided to leave," he continued, talking over her, "you ran to the government with a stack of evidence you'd been hoarding for years, to get revenge on a boss you didn't like, and to collect $1 million whistleblower reward. Isn't that really what this is about? Revenge and money." There was a murmur in the courtroom. Clara looked him dead in the eye. She didn't flinch. "No," she said, clear and firm. "My mother had stage 3 lung cancer for almost the entire time I worked at Voss Innovations. She needed constant medical care. She needed expensive medication. She needed insurance. I couldn't quit. I couldn't lose my job. If I'd spoken up earlier, I would have been fired immediately. I would have lost my insurance. And my mother would have died sooner because I couldn't afford her treatment." Her voice didn't waver. She held the defense attorney's gaze. "I stayed because I had no other choice. But I kept records because I knew what they were doing was wrong. And I knew that someday, when I didn't have to choose between my mom's life and doing the right thing, I would make them answer for it. I'm not here for revenge. I'm not here for the money. I'm here because stealing $9.5 million from the public is wrong. And no one gets away with that forever." The courtroom was dead silent. The defense attorney stared at her for a long second, like he'd been expecting her to break. Then he nodded, short and sharp. No further questions. She stepped down from the witness stand an hour later. She walked out of the courtroom, past the rows of spectators, past the clicking cameras, and out into the hallway. A reporter caught up to her by the elevators, microphone in hand. "Ms. Bennett. Ms. Bennett, do you have any comment on the trial? What made you decide to come forward?" Clara stopped. She turned to face the camera. "I came forward because it was the right thing to do," she said. "For 6 years, I watched a company break the law over and over again, and I stayed silent because I had no other option. But no one should have to choose between keeping their job and doing what's right. And no one should be able to steal millions from the public just because they're rich and powerful." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "If you're watching this, and you're in a situation like I was, if you know something wrong is happening and you're scared to speak up, don't be. You're not alone. And the truth always comes out. Sooner or later, it always comes out." She turned and walked to the elevator. The reporter called after her, but she didn't look back. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On the third afternoon, the judge called everyone back into the courtroom to read the verdict. Clara sat in the back row, quiet and still. She didn't need to be there. But she wanted to be. She wanted to see it end. The bailiff read the verdicts, one by one. Guilty on all counts. Harold Voss was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, plus a fine of $5 million. Priscilla Drake, who'd pled guilty and testified against Harold in exchange for a lighter sentence, got 3 years in prison, a $2 million fine, and permanent revocation of her CPA license. Voss Innovations was ordered to pay back all back taxes plus penalties and interest, totaling just over $15 million. The company declared bankruptcy 2 weeks later. It was over. That night, Clara drove out to the cemetery on the edge of town. She brought a bouquet of her mom's favorite white roses and set them down on the headstone. She sat on the grass in front of the grave for a long time, the cool evening air blowing her hair back. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. "It's over. They were found guilty. They're going to prison." She paused, brushing a leaf off the stone. "I got a new job. At Haleworth. It's a good company. Clean. I'm gonna be running their audit department. $180,000 a year. Can you believe that?" She smiled a little. "You always told me to do the right thing. Even when it was hard. Even when it hurt. I tried, Mom. I really tried. I messed up sometimes. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. But in the end, I did it." The wind rustled the leaves in the oak tree above. It almost sounded like a voice. "I miss you," she said, her voice thickening. "Every day. I wish you were here to see all this. I wish you could see that it all worked out." She sat there until the sun went down, until the sky turned dark and the first stars came out. Then she stood up, brushed the grass off her pants, and kissed her fingers before pressing them lightly to the cold stone. "I'll be back soon," she said. "I love you." She walked back to her car and drove home. The city lights sparkled in the dark one by one, stretching out as far as the eye could see. It was over. But it was also just the beginning. 3 weeks after the verdict, Clara officially started her full-time role at Haleworth Corporation. HR gave her a corner office on the 27th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the river. A brand-new laptop sat on her desk, along with a stack of company policy binders and a small potted snake plant. "Ms. Bennett, these are your ID badge and building access fob," the HR coordinator said, a bright young woman in her early 20s. "Margaret said to take the morning to get settled, and there's a finance leadership meeting at 3 o'clock you'll need to attend." "Thank you," Clara said, picking up the ID badge. She looked at the photo, at her name and title printed underneath, Clara Bennett, Deputy Director of Finance. She sat down in her ergonomic office chair and spun slowly around, looking out at the view. For a second, she thought about her old cubicle at Voss, tucked away by the copy room, with a chipped mug and a single framed photo of her mom on the desk. This was a world away. Her phone buzzed on the desk. A text from an unknown number. "Don't get too comfortable. This isn't over." She stared at it for 3 seconds. Then she deleted it and blocked the number. She'd gotten a dozen messages like this since the trial. Threats, insults, rants from people who thought she was a snitch, a traitor, a troublemaker. She didn't care. Let them yell. Let them threaten. She'd already faced worse. At 3 o'clock, she walked into the finance conference room. 20 or so finance managers and team leads sat around the big table. They all went quiet when she walked in. Margaret sat at the head of the table and gestured for Clara to sit in the seat to her right. "Everyone, I'd like you all to meet Clara Bennett, our new Deputy Director of Finance," Margaret said, looking around the table. "I'm sure most of you have heard of her. She'll be heading up our internal audit and compliance division going forward. I expect you all to give her your full cooperation." There was a smattering of applause. Clara could feel the looks: curious, skeptical, a few wary. She knew what they were thinking. The whistleblower. The woman who took down a whole company. They were probably wondering if she'd come in here and start firing people, if she'd dig up dirt on everyone, if she was out for blood. She stood up, her hands resting lightly on the table. She looked around the room, making eye contact with each person, one by one. Good afternoon. I'm Clara. I'm sure a lot of you have questions about why I'm here and what this means for you. So let me be clear, I'm not here to police anyone. I'm not here to find fault or get people in trouble or make your jobs harder. I'm here to help us build a better, cleaner, more reliable financial system. If your work is clean, if your numbers are honest, then we're going to be great partners. If there are problems, we'll fix them together. No blame, no drama, just solutions. She paused, her gaze steady. That's all I have to say. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. She sat down. There was a beat of silence. Then the applause was louder, warmer this time. After the meeting, a man in his mid-30s with short brown hair and a friendly smile walked over to her. He held out a hand. Liam Carter, Internal Audit Manager. Great speech. We've been needing someone like you around here for a long time. Clara shook his hand. Thank you, Liam. Good to meet you. Actually, I was hoping I could run something by you, he said, lowering his voice slightly. We've been auditing the Haleworth Logistics subsidiary out on the west side. We found some discrepancies in their procurement numbers, about $300,000 unaccounted for over the last 2 years. The general manager there has been stonewalling us. Says it's normal inventory variance. I don't buy it. Clara's eyebrows went up. 300,000? Yep. He handed her a thin file folder. All the numbers are in there. Looks like kickbacks from vendors, from what I can tell. But we can't prove it without access to their internal records, and he's been dragging his feet. Clara flipped through the report, scanning the numbers quickly. The pattern was familiar. Too familiar. The same inflated invoices, the same fake vendors, the same excuses. Just smaller scale. Tomorrow morning, she said, closing the folder. You and I will drive out to the logistics center. Bring everything you have. We'll get our answers. Liam's face lit up. Really? Great. I'll have the team pull everything tonight. The next morning, they drove out to Haleworth Logistics, a sprawling warehouse and office complex on the industrial side of town. The general manager, Thomas Carter, no relation to Liam, met them at the door. He was a big man in his late 40s, with a round belly and a too broad smile, his suit too tight across the shoulders. Liam, good to see you again. He shook Liam's hand, then turned to Clara, his smile faltering just a little when he recognized her name. Miss Bennett. Welcome, welcome. I didn't know we were expecting you. Just a routine audit follow-up, Clara said pleasantly. Mr. Carter, we found some discrepancies in your 2022 and 2023 procurement reports. Roughly $300,000 in payments to vendors that don't match up with received inventory. We'd like to take a look at your full purchasing records and bank statements. Thomas's smile slipped. He let out a big, hearty laugh, like she'd told a joke. Those discrepancies. Yeah, we've had some inventory tracking issues lately. New software, you know how it is. All just clerical errors. We're working on cleaning it up. Clerical errors, Clara repeated. She pulled a printed spreadsheet out of her folder and laid it on the table in front of him. 10 separate payments over 2 years, all to 3 different vendors that are all registered to your brother-in-law. All 4 general supply services with no delivery receipts, no inventory logs, no paper trail at all. That's a lot of clerical errors. Thomas's face went red. Now, hold on a minute. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice still pleasant but sharp around the edges, there are 2 ways this can go. 1, you admit what you did, you pay back the money, you cooperate fully with our investigation, and we handle this quietly through HR and legal. Or 2, you keep lying, we bring in forensic auditors and the police, and this becomes a very public criminal case. Your choice. The room went quiet. Thomas's jaw worked. He looked from Clara to Liam and back again. Now wait, he said, his voice getting sharper. You think you can just walk in here and accuse me of stealing? I've been with this company for 12 years. 12 years. I helped build this place. Arthur Hale knows me personally. You can't just. I can, Clara said simply. And I will. Because $300,000 in company money didn't just disappear into clerical errors. And I'm not going to look the other way just because you've been here a long time. No one is above the rules. Not even you. Thomas's face turned purple. He slammed his fist on the table. You're just some hotshot whistleblower who thinks she's better than everyone. You got lucky with Voss, but this is Hale Worth. You can't just walk around firing people and ruining careers. Mr. Carter, Liam said, stepping forward slightly, Ms. Bennett has Margaret's full backing on this. And Arthur's. If you don't cooperate, you will be terminated immediately, and the case will be referred to the DA's office. That's not a threat. That's a fact. Thomas deflated. All the anger went out of him in one big rush. He sank back into his chair, his shoulders slumping. Hell, he muttered. He ran a hand over his face. It started small. Just a little extra cash here and there. My wife was sick, medical bills. It got out of hand. Clara nodded. She'd heard that excuse 100 times. It always started small. It always got out of hand. Gather all the records, she said. Everything. We'll be here all day if we have to. And I'd strongly suggest you get a lawyer. They spent the whole day at the logistics center, going through records, reconciling accounts, documenting every last dollar. By the end of the day, they had it all. $317,000 in kickbacks and fraudulent payments over 2 years. When they got back to headquarters that evening, Clara reported everything to Margaret. Margaret listened, her face serious, and nodded when Clara was done. Thank you for handling this quickly, she said. Thomas will be terminated immediately, and we'll refer the case to the DA. No exceptions. Understood, Clara said. Clara, Margaret said, before she could leave. Arthur heard about what happened out at logistics. He said to tell you good work. This is exactly why we hired you. Clara nodded. She walked back to her office, and for the first time, she felt like she truly belonged at Hale Worth. The news spread through the company like wildfire. People talked about it in the break rooms, in the hallways, in the parking garage. The new deputy director had taken out Tom Carter, a 12-year veteran, on her first week on the job. Some people were nervous. Some people were relieved. A lot of people started double-checking their spreadsheets. That night, there was a knock on Clara's apartment door. She opened it to find a woman in her late 40s, plain clothes, red-eyed, holding a crumpled tissue in her hand. Miss Bennett, she said, her voice wobbly. I'm Linda Carter, Tom's wife. Clara's shoulders tensed. She'd had this visit before with Priscilla. She was getting tired of people showing up at her door begging for mercy. Ms. Carter, she said, steady, if you're here to ask me to drop the investigation. No, I'm not. Linda shook her head quickly. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I wanted to apologize. For what Tom did. I had no idea. I thought the extra money was from overtime, from bonuses. I had no idea he was stealing. I'm so sorry. Clara hesitated. She stepped back and gestured inside. Would you like to come in? Linda shook her head. No, I won't take up your time. I just wanted to say, I know he deserves whatever happens. He made a stupid, terrible choice. And now we have to live with it. But I wanted to thank you, in a way, for not sweeping it under the rug. For doing the right thing, even when it's hard. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The doctor says my cancer is in remission now, you know. The medical bills are almost paid off. If he'd just waited, if he'd just asked for help, but he never does. He always thinks he has to handle everything himself. Clara's throat tightened. She thought of her mom, of the medical bills, of all the times she'd felt like she had to handle everything herself. She understood. She really did. Miss Carter, she said gently, if Tom cooperates fully, if he pays back all the money, and if he takes a plea deal, the sentence will be lighter. A lot lighter. Tell him to do that. Tell him not to fight it. It'll be better for everyone. Linda nodded, her lips trembling. Thank you. Thank you so much. She turned and walked down the hallway. Clara closed the door and leaned back against it, sighing. Doing the right thing was never as clean and simple as it sounded in the movies. There were always consequences. Always people who got hurt, even when they didn't deserve it. But that didn't mean it wasn't still the right thing to do. Over the next year, Clara threw herself into her work. She restructured the entire internal audit department, implemented new compliance protocols across every subsidiary, and uncovered 3 more small-scale fraud schemes in different departments. She worked long hours, but they were good hours. Honest hours. She went home every night tired, but proud. She made friends. She went out for dinner with Liam and some of the other people on her team after work on Fridays. She joined the company book club. She started taking pottery classes on weekends. Small things. Normal things. 6 months into the job, she got a call from the City Chamber of Commerce. Ms. Bennett? This is Charlotte Pierce, Events Director for the Aurora City Business Alliance. We're hosting our annual Regional Business Leadership Summit next month, and we'd love to have you as our keynote speaker for the Ethics and Compliance track. We want you to talk about your experience and about building a culture of integrity in finance. Clara hesitated. She'd never been a public speaker. She'd never liked being the center of attention. But then she thought about the email she'd gotten a week earlier from a young accountant in another city. She'd found Clara's name online and written to her, saying she was in a similar situation, stuck at a company that was cutting corners, scared to speak up, scared to lose her job. She'd said reading about Clara had given her the courage to start looking for another job, to start keeping records. Clara had written her back, told her she was brave, told her she wasn't alone. Okay, she said to Charlotte Pierce. I'll do it. The summit was held at the downtown convention center, a huge, bright room filled with hundreds of business owners, executives, and finance professionals from all over the state. Clara stood backstage, waiting for her turn to speak, and felt her hands shake a little. Then she walked out onto the stage, and the lights came up, and she looked out at all those faces, and suddenly she wasn't nervous anymore. Good morning, she said, her voice clear and strong, echoing through the room. My name is Clara Bennett. 6 years ago, I was just like a lot of you. I was a young accountant, fresh out of college, excited to start my career. I took a job at a small tech startup, thinking I'd found my big break. She paused, looking out over the crowd. It didn't take long to realize something was wrong. The numbers didn't add up. The rules were being bent, then broken. And I was faced with a choice that a lot of people in this room have probably faced or will face someday. Do I speak up? Do I risk my job, my security, everything I've worked for? Or do I look the other way? Do I keep my head down and collect my paycheck? She told them the story. Not the dramatic, headline version. The real version. The hard version. About her mom's cancer. About the fear. About the 6 years of quiet, of carrying a secret, of feeling like she was selling a little piece of herself every day. About why she'd stayed. And about why she'd finally spoken up. People ask me if I regret it, she said. They ask me if it was worth it. And the answer is yes. Not because of the reward money. Not because of the job offers. Because for the first time in my life, I can look at myself in the mirror and know I didn't take the easy way out. Because I know when my mom was watching, she was proud. She looked out at the crowd. To all the business owners in the room, I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here to tell you that integrity isn't a liability. It's an asset. It's the foundation of every great company. You can cut corners to make a quick buck, but it will always catch up to you. Always. And to everyone else, everyone who's ever felt stuck, everyone who's ever had to choose between what's easy and what's right, you're not alone. And it's never too late to do the right thing. The room erupted in applause. It was loud and warm and genuine. People stood up. They clapped until their hands were red. After her speech, dozens of people lined up to talk to her. Business owners who wanted her to consult for their companies. Young accountants who wanted to thank her, who wanted advice. Reporters who wanted interviews. She talked to all of them, patiently, kindly. One young woman, maybe 22, fresh out of college, stood in front of her with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said. I just started at my first job, and I already see things that aren't right. I was so scared. But now I know I can handle it. Clara smiled at her. You can. And if you ever need advice, you can reach out. Anytime. She gave the young woman her email. She meant it. That night, she got an email from the State Department of Revenue. They were giving her the annual Tax Integrity Award for her outstanding contributions to tax compliance and ethical leadership. The awards ceremony would be held at the state capitol the next month. She sat at her kitchen table and read the email twice. Then she printed it out and taped it to her fridge, right next to a photo of her mom. The awards ceremony was fancy, held in the grand ballroom of the state capitol building. Politicians, business leaders, tax officials, all of them dressed up, eating fancy food, making small talk. Clara wore a simple dark blue dress, the first nice dress she'd bought in years. When they called her name, she walked up to the stage and accepted the plaque from the State Secretary of Revenue. It was heavy, polished wood with a brass plate, engraved with her name and the year. Clara Bennett, the secretary said into the microphone, reminds us all that one person with the courage to do the right thing can make a difference. That integrity isn't just a buzzword. It's a choice we make every single day. The crowd applauded. Clara looked out at all those faces, and for a split second, she wished her mom was there. She wished she could see her. She wished she could tell her she'd done good. After the ceremony, a man in an expensive suit approached her. He was older, in his 60s, with white hair and a kind face. He held out a hand. "Miss Bennett. I'm Arthur Hale." Clara's eyes widened. She'd been at Haleworth for almost a year, but she'd never met the founder and CEO in person. He traveled almost constantly, rarely at headquarters. "Mr. Hale, it's an honor to meet you." She shook his hand. "Please call me Arthur." He smiled. "I wanted to congratulate you on the award. And on the incredible work you've done at Haleworth this past year. Margaret tells me you've completely transformed the audit department. Cut our financial risk in half. Found millions in waste and fraud we didn't even know about. Thank you, sir. I just try to do my job." "Nonsense." He shook his head. "You've done more than that. You've set a tone. People are more careful now. More honest. They know someone's watching and that someone cares about doing things the right way. That's priceless." He paused, looking at her thoughtfully. "Margaret is planning to step back next year. Semi-retirement. She'll stay on as an advisor, but she wants to hand off the CFO role. I'd like you to take it." Clara blinked. CFO. Chief Financial Officer. Of Haleworth Corporation. A $3 billion company. That was the title Harold had promised her 6 years ago, back when he was still drawing her pictures of IPOs and 7-figure salaries. Back when it had all been a lie. Now it was real. And she'd earned it. "Arthur," she said, her voice steady, that's a huge honor. I'd need to think about it." "Of course," he said, holding up a hand. "Take all the time you need. Talk to Margaret. Ask questions. Think about what you want for the department. But I want you to know you're my first choice. And you're Margaret's first choice, too. You've earned this, Clara. Every bit of it." She left the ceremony that night with a lot to think about. She drove to the cemetery and sat with her mom for a while, just talking. Telling her about the award, about the job offer, about everything that had happened. When she got home, she sat on her couch and looked around her apartment. It was nice now. Warm. Full of books and plants and pottery she'd made herself. It felt like home. 6 years ago, she'd been a scared kid, desperate to keep her job, desperate to save her mom, trapped in a job that was slowly eating her alive. Now she was one of the most respected finance professionals in the state. She had a job she loved, friends she cared about, a life she was proud of. She thought about all the people who'd told her she'd never work again. Who'd said she was ruining her career. Who'd called her a snitch and a traitor. They'd been wrong. A week later, she walked into Arthur Hale's office and told him yes. She would be the next CFO of Haleworth Corporation. The announcement went out company-wide the next day. There were congratulations, of course. Emails, cards, people stopping her in the hallway to say well done. Most people were happy for her. A few people were nervous. But everyone respected her. Her first day as CFO, she stood in front of the entire finance department and gave a short speech. She told them her priorities: transparency, integrity, excellence. She told them her door was always open. She told them that if they saw something wrong, they should speak up. that there would be no retaliation, that doing the right thing was always the right choice. When she was done, the whole room applauded. A year later, almost exactly 2 years after she'd walked out of Voss Innovations for the last time, she got a phone call from the state penitentiary. "Ms. Bennett? This is Officer Reed at Aurora Federal Correctional Institution. We have an inmate here who's requested a visit with you. His name is Harold Voss." Clara held the phone to her ear, surprised. She hadn't thought about Harold in months. He was in prison. He was out of her life. That was how it was supposed to be. What does he want? "He says he wants to apologize," the officer said. "Says he has some things he needs to say to you face to face." She thought about it for a minute. She didn't owe him anything. She didn't have to go. But she was curious. And a small part of her wanted to see it, wanted to see that he was actually sorry, that he'd actually learned something. "Okay," she said. "I'll come tomorrow afternoon." The next day, she drove out to the prison on the edge of town. It was a big, gray, concrete building surrounded by razor wire and guard towers. It felt cold, even from the parking lot. She checked in at the front desk, went through security, and was led to a small visiting booth with a thick glass partition and a phone on each side. Harold was led in a few minutes later. He looked terrible. He'd lost a lot of weight. His hair was gray, cut short in a prison buzz cut. His face was lined, tired, older. He sat down on the other side of the glass and picked up the phone. "Clara," he said. His voice was rough, gravelly, like he'd been smoking too much. "Thanks for coming." She picked up her phone. "What did you want to say, Harold?" He looked down at his hands for a long minute. They were callous now, not soft and manicured like they'd been when he was CEO. "I wanted to apologize," he said finally. He looked up at her, and his eyes were tired. No anger. No hatred. Just regret. "I was wrong. About everything. I treated you badly. I treated everyone badly. I got greedy. I thought the rules didn't apply to me. And I ruined everything. My company. My reputation. My family. All of it." He paused, swallowing hard. "I've had a lot of time to think in here. About all the choices I made. About all the people I hurt. And you were the one who tried to warn me. Back at the beginning. You told me the books were wrong. You told me it would catch up to me. And I didn't listen. I thought I was smarter than everyone. I thought I'd never get caught." Clara listened. She didn't say anything. "I heard about you," he said, a small, bitter smile on his face. "CFO of Haleworth. Award winner. Big shot. I guess I was right about one thing: you were always the best one I had. If I'd run this company the right way, if I'd listened to you, we could have built something real. Something that lasted."